everybody, my name is Myung Moon and welcome to iHome Church. For those of you joining us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our email list. Well, today I have a wonderful question from one of our viewers that I would like to answer. This question came from this lady who asked me, thank you for your efforts in iHome Church, but why are you so happy? And why do you look like you're having so much fun? This question has been typical throughout my whole life, and even in my own family I was ridiculed as the jolly one because I tended to take a much happier or much more optimistic approach to whatever the family or I was dealing with. But I sincerely believe that choosing to be happy and choosing to look at the positive side of life has really been the key to my survival in life. And I think coming from a religious community like ours, there's kind of this tendency that when you live a life of faith, the most important thing is to live a life of sacrifice and denial. And if you look like somebody who is enjoying life too much, maybe you're laughing too much, or you seem a little bit too light-hearted, or maybe you want to share the good news in your life with others. People kind of have this tendency to look at you as a person who is not deeply grounded, a person who is not profound. But one of the things that I realize in the example of my father, the Reverend Myung Moon, is here he is, who comes to this world as the Messiah, the Lord of Lords. And he brings a very, very inspiring message, a message really encouraging each and every one of us to live a life inspired by true love. And one of the things that I've noticed about this man is he is obsessed with what he wants to accomplish in terms of making sure that he accomplished certain things by a certain providential deadline. So he works incredibly hard. But he also plays incredibly hard too, in that he never forgets to have fun while he's working hard for the sake of providence. He's always cracking jokes. He's always making humorous commentaries on different situations that one may find oneself in. And he is always dancing and laughing, and you really cannot attend a church celebration without, having to experience the fear of being called out in front of everyone and being put on the spot and asked to sing and dance. That was how this incredible man was. He worked hard and he played hard. And so when I look at his life, he has gone through prison. He has been in and out of prison 6 times and, gone through all these incredible, tortuous experiences, incredibly painful tortures that he had to bear. But he never really lost that sparkle in his eye. He never lost that joie de vivre, as French call it, the joy of living, the incredible excitement at being alive. And I think that really was the key in his ability to never, never, never give up and never lose hope. And so when I think about my father, this comic strip comes to mind. And there was this comic strip that this artist put together, and he drew a picture of these, bunch of brothers or friars in a monastery. And, they were diligent in terms of transcribing the words, of Jesus Christ. And their whole life was that of denial. They gave up the worldly renown, worldly riches, worldly loves. They gave up everything to really commit themselves to transcribing diligently and as faithfully as they could the words of God and Jesus Christ. And so you see them, hunkering down in this really dark cave, and only the flicker of candlelight is a source of life that you detect. It's almost as if these figures have become part of the environment. They become kind of like this petrified figures that are just silently transcribing these words away. And in come, this young, excited brother or friar, or a young upstart, as maybe the other brothers or friars might call him. And the young upstart says, brothers, I got news. I got news for you. You know that word that we were living by? We were living by the word celibate. But actually, I realized the word was missing the letter R. Jesus Christ and God is actually asking us not to be celibate, but to celebrate. We have to celebrate life, meaning we have to be grateful for our lives, and we have to be fulfilled in our lives. And I've often wondered, why people of religion had always took themselves apart from the world, to find enlightenment, to experience nirvana, to experience a higher conscious of being. And many people have lived their lives, in the pursuit of a higher relationship with the divine or God or whatever you want to call it. And basically, said goodbye to the world and went on to work on themselves, to really seek individual fulfillment or salvation. And they did so through denial and sacrifice. But the incredible thing about the message of Reverend Moon and the message of True Parents is that is not the total picture. In a way, the history of Christianity was really, when we understood life, we understood it as something that we have to give up. We have to somehow deny ourselves. We have to be sacrificing constantly in order to seek and satisfy the individual salvation that we were all striving towards. But the incredible thing about the message of True Parents is that we not only should be focused on individual salvation, but here we're talking about the salvation of family, of our family, starting with our family, but it doesn't end there. We're not just talking about our family, we're talking about all the families of the world. We're talking about not just our own individual salvation, maybe that we thought we could do by denying the world, but God makes it a little bit more difficult for us. God says, stay in the world, be of good cheer, but with the great attitude. Not only achieve your own family salvation, but the salvation of the whole world. In a way, not forgetting the reason why we're all here. We're all here because we are all sons and daughters of God, because we all belong to God's family. So this message that was kind of in a very humorous way encapsulated in this comic strip is something that I remind myself from time to time, because there's this kind of tendency, if you're not serious all the time, or if you're not weeping all the time, you're not faithful enough. Your faith is not deep enough. Somehow if you like to laugh, somehow if you are seemingly enjoying life or singing or dancing, you are not really getting it in terms of being that profound disciple of Christ. But being that profound disciple of Christ and of True Parents means not just to live a life of a denial and sacrifice, but through our sacrifice create something real, tangible, something that allows us to be filled with this Holy Spirit, to be inspired and empowered with a desire to connect with the world, so that we can ultimately connect the world to God. And so in the example of my father and in the example of this comic strip, I think it's quite fitting if we ask ourselves, well, what does the Bible have to say about this? Well, when we look at the book of Romans, which is really the most systematic interpretation of the Christian message that emphasizes universality of God's work through Christ in terms of allowing the blessings and all this hope to be enjoyed by all people, Jews and Gentiles alike. Well, the book of Romans says in chapter 12, verse 15, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. It's a very, very important saying for me, because the Bible is basically saying when you want to celebrate life, the key operative word is relationship. From the word celibate to celebrate, the letter R was missing. And relationship is the operative word. When we really want to rejoice with others and weep with others, it implies a certain amount of maturity, certain amount of ability to empathize with other people, or the ability to actually learn how to be happy for other people's blessing. And so when we live a life like the way these brother friars were, deep in the cavern, transcribing away, they were living a life of celibacy. They were being celibate. The letter I there, C-E-L-I, it kind of emphasizes the individual, me. But when we change the word from celibate to celebrate, not only do we add an R, but we switch the I to an E, which kind of reminds us that it's not about the individual here. We're not talking about the only individual salvation, but really talking about everyone. We're talking about loving everyone. We're talking about everyone's salvation, or the world's salvation. And it kind of propels us and compels us to be empathetic to those that we love. And so when we study clinical psychology, and there have been many research and studies done, and this one study was done by Dr. Thomas Phelan, and he is a renowned clinical psychologist who has dealt with problem children and ADHD. How do you tackle problems like that? And he wrote a fantastic book on helping parents, strengthen their bonds with their children. But certainly the advice that he outlines in his book can be applied not just between a parent and child, but also between spouses, and also between colleagues, also between, different people in our life that we wish to have a genuine relationship with. And, he talks about how there are two main components to really strengthen a relationship within the family, or within the friendship, fellowship, or whatever we're talking about. And he says number one is the ability to listen. And when he talks about listening, he makes a distinction between good listening and bad listening. Good listening is how he defines as sympathetic listening. In that, for example, a person knows how to go through these 4 steps to really be that sympathetic listener that makes the person that is doing the expressing understood. And he says number 1 is an opener. An opener is some kind of a word or some kind of a phrase like, wow, what do you mean? Or tell me what's happened. Or these non-verbal behavior cues that let the other person know you're ready to listen. For instance, you will sit next to the person and you will give them eye contact. These non-verbal behavior that allows the other person that you want to listen to what they have to say. And then he talks about the next point, which is non-judgmental questions. He says the way to really strengthen a bond is not just, provide somebody with an opener, but also start asking non-judgmental questions. Don't ask the person that came storming into your room, what the bleep? That would not be a non-judgmental question. That would be a judgmental question. But a question like, what made you do what you did? What was going through your mind? Might be an example of a non-judgmental question. And then he recommends the third step, which he calls reflective feeling, where you try to imagine yourself putting yourself in his situation and experiencing what he must have felt. And you articulate that back to the person who is talking to you so that they feel they feel validated. They don't feel judged. And, it's not that validating what somebody has to say is just kind of the beginning of the conversation. But you're not basically saying what you did or did not do, the right or the wrong, is okay. But what you're doing is just kind of probing and hoping that the other person will open up their heart. And then the fourth thing that he recommends is what he calls checks and summaries, where you basically summarize from time to time in the course of your conversation what the other person is saying to you, to let them know that you understand what they're saying and you are trying to see the world from their viewpoint. And he says, a good listener or a sympathetic listener is really somebody who has an incredible communication skill. But it's not just a communication skill that strengthens relationship, but that communication skill comes about because of a certain attitude towards life or a certain attitude towards looking at others. And so he was saying that communication skills are incredibly important, but probably more important than the communication skills in terms of building or strengthening bonds is what he calls shared fun. And he uses the example of, many of us when we start dating and getting to know somebody for the first time, we are constantly going out, we are doing things, we eat out at restaurants, we go on picnics, we go to movie theaters, we go and see the show. All of these turns us into almost adrenaline junkies, but we're constantly doing things with each other, all the while having conversations about each other so that we get to know a little bit more about each other's history and past and what they would like to do in the future. But I think a lot of people, he was saying, kind of takes that as the paradigm of what their married life should be. And so they tell themselves, I'm having this incredible time with this person that I'm dating, and I'm only spending half the time with this person. Now imagine if I spent all my time with this person. That would be not just half the fun, but doubly the fun. But he cautions us by saying, well, dating and marriage are two different things. Marriage implies responsibility. It's not just having fun. But it implies that we're going to work together and build something together, a wonderful or a beautiful family. So when he counsels lots of people, so many men and women come to him saying, well, John was just fantastic. Amy was just the light of my life. Then we got married and, she just became boring, or she changed. She's not as much fun as she used to be. And what he's trying to say is, what the reasons why we got married in many instances, that's something that's lost the moment we enter into this contractual thing, because people have the same expectations, not realizing that they're entering into almost like a partnership where we both agree to work hard and play hard to build a beautiful family. And so it's not so much that you are no more fun to be around. It's just that our expectations of a marriage was not really the right kind of expectation to have in real life. And so he talks about how, the success of any relationship, parent and child, between spouses, between friends, between colleagues, is really about having a really a healthy balance between work and play. And so, I remember when I first started Loving Life, when I was in charge of the Unification Church 4 years ago, so many people were shocked, saying, Loving Life, it's a music ministry, there's all this dancing and all this singing and all this rock music, and, people are not dressing in suits, and everybody had different conceptions of what was proper. But we come from kind of the background or the foundation of Christianity, where everything was about really a life of sacrifice and a life of denial. And, we have to keep the world at bay. We can't include popular culture. We have to reject all the things that tempt us because we are too weak to survive it all. But what true parents are saying is it really doesn't matter where or what kind of a background we come from. The point is, when we realize that God is our heavenly parent and understand the mentality that a parent has when they hold their child for the first time in their life, you don't look at that baby and say, I want you to live a life of denial and sacrifice in the dark caverns, transcribing every word I say. We as parents look upon that child and we wish it great happiness, great health, and great prosperity. We want the child to live a fulfilled life. We want the child to love their life, to celebrate their life. Celebrate it because each and every day is a gift from God. And for those of us who've seen death head on and been in really, really extremely difficult situations where, maybe at times you've lost hope, you realize that when you again reconnect to that spirit of our Heavenly Parent up in heaven, there is no reason not to celebrate life. And we do so by being happy for others, by enjoying our lives, having fun, shared fun with our loved ones, creating wonderful memories as life goes on. And so a lot of people, they say, the message of Reverend Moon is so childlike. It's too idealistic. He believes that the peace building starts by one individual deciding to be a great man or woman and then coming together in this holy matrimony called a blessing and deciding to build this thing called a wonderful family. And so he believes that you can change the world one family at a time. And that may seem rather simplistic and idealistic, but I've seen it work in so many situations. I've seen how one man or one woman or one family can change their whole community and their whole society, the whole world. My father and mother, they're just one example. And so what they're asking us to do is to be the true parents of humankind. So here we are, when we look at the affairs of the world, we're looking at the effects of hundreds and thousands of years of not really living a life celebrating God in our lives. And so we may think like, how the heck are we going to solve all of world's problems? Well, it starts with you and me. And it starts with the desire to build an ideal family. And in so doing, we change ourselves, we change our families, we change our communities, societies, world, our nation and world. So some things in life, or the most profound things in life, tends to be very simple. That's why I'm a huge believer in living one's life with simple elegance. The most powerful mathematical equations tend to be simple and elegant. Just look at E equals mc squared. And so the message of Reverend Moon really kind of inspiring us to be excited about life, God is our heavenly parent, is our father and mother. Be excited about who you are. And if we can learn to celebrate our lives with loving others in our lives, or having this beautiful relationship, or learning to have beautiful relationships by strengthening the bonds through wonderful communication skills or shared fun, it basically sits on the foundation of a great attitude. So, I promised myself to God many, many years ago that no matter what I'm facing, I'm going to start my day with a thank you, and I'm going to end my day with a thank you. So please try starting your day having a great attitude, thanking God for everything that we have in our lives, and not concentrating on what we do not have, but what we do have, and all the reasons why we need to live a thankful life, a life of gratitude. And then you will see, as each day goes by, slowly, one by one, things will fall into place, simply and elegantly. So, I hope you have a wonderful day and a beautiful week. Take care.
I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I wandered so aimless, life filled with sin. I wouldn't let my dear Savior in. Then Jesus came like a stranger in the night. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. Just like a blind man I wandered alone. Worries and fears I claimed for my own. Then like the blind man that God gave back his sight. Oh, praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I was a fool to wander and stray. Straight is the gate, narrow the way. Now I have traded the wrong for the right. Oh, praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Oh, praise the Lord, I saw the light.
If you have any questions and comments, please leave them below the video or go to myungmoon.com and use the contact form. And don't forget to subscribe to our email list. Take care.